The Ultimate Husband. By Sky Kissing Wolf.
Episode 111. Say it again. The sales assistant was furious. Don't you feel ashamed of yourself? If you can't afford, then don't come to a high-end mall like this. Wearing cheap clothes like yours, you still have the guts to come here. What if you dirty the dress when you try on the dress? Even if you didn't dirty it, you would just leave without buying. Waste of my time. That's right, the girl is right. The rich-looking lady added, being a sales assistant is not an easy job. If you don't plan to buy, then don't try it on. There is a department store, the clothes there will suit you better. Daryl, let's just go. Lily pulled Daryl slightly, speaking silently. As a matter of fact, Lily was only teasing Daryl. She had no intention to get Daryl to buy the dress for her. Daryl signaled to Lily not to speak, then he replied with a smile, not only I want this dress, for all the designs you have in your boutique, I want all that of them as long as they are my wife's size. Right after he finished speaking, he tossed his bank card over. The shop assistant could not stop laughing while grabbing the bank card. Yes, sure. We had just performed our stock count this afternoon. A total of 80 designs, one piece for each design. The total would be $1,980,000. If your bank card does not have sufficient credit today, I shall call the cops. The shop assistant walked towards the cashier counter as she spoke. She had not seen a Platinum Corporation bank card before. Following that, was the beep of the successful transaction. What? The transaction went through. $1,980,000, and the transaction went through successfully. Everyone was stunned. For a normal bank card, once it was swiped, there would be a small receipt generated. As for Platinum Corporation bank cards, after it was swiped, the computer on the counter would display the available balance. However, due to the angle of the computer, only the few shop assistants could see it. There is, 5.8 billion. The long strings of zeros displayed stunned all the shop assistants that they dropped onto the floor. I am sorry, sir, sorry. The shop assistant was busy apologizing with tears. Even the boutique manager came to help with the packing of more than 100 pieces of clothing. You don't have to apologize, Daryl said while smiling, and pointed at another of the shop assistants. All the commissions are to be awarded to her, and also please send all the clothes to the Linden family's mansion. After that, Daryl left, holding Lily's hand. They left behind the group of people looking at each other. Linden family. No wonder they were so rich. They were the Linden family. Why did you buy so many of the clothes? Lily asked as they went outside. Daryl smiled looking at her. This is my first time buying clothes for my wife. My wife needs a new set every day. Childish. Lily rolled her eyes, but she felt so sweet in her heart. Oh yes, how did you have all the money? Don't tell me it is a loan from your friend again. $2 million, which friend would be so generous to Daryl? Just at the same time, there was some noise coming from not far away. Around the corner in front, there was a big crowd. Among them, stood a beautiful figure, looking attractive. Was that not Yvonne Young? President Young, what is she doing here? Lily saw Yvonne too. She could not hold her curiosity. Come, let's go and take a look. When they managed to squeeze into the crowd, they saw an antique seller, holding a rusted sword, and talking away. Let me tell you, this is my family treasure. It has been passed down many generations. According to my grandpa, this is a treasure from the Han Dynasty. Look at the rust. The people surrounding laughed. Even from the Han Dynasty. Stop bragging. Exactly, it is a fake. The antique seller's face turned red. He started to argue with the few people. Daryl looked around. Not only was Yvonne there, but the few owners of the few antique stores near Pearl Pavilion were also there too. Even some businessmen that Daryl had never met were there. They looked like antique buyers too. At that moment, one saw Daryl. She smiled and nodded. What a coincidence to meet at such a place, but Lily, who had never come out with him, was right there. Daryl smiled at Yvonne, and turned his attention to the sword held by the antique seller. Oh, the carvings on the antique sword were really special. The remaining parts of the sword that were not wrapped in the metal cover were shining deeply. The sword looked interesting. Boss, how much for the sword? After observing for a while, Daryl asked. The antique seller raised his hands. $800,000, non-negotiable. The antique seller's eyes blinked while he spoke, looking suspicious. Episode 112. Wow. People surrounding them took a cold breath. That's crazy. $8 million. It's daylight robbery. Hungry for money, are you? All the things in your stall combined wouldn't have worth more than $8,000. Everyone was commenting. Yvonne and the few antique store owners were shaking their heads, smiling. Out of their expectation, someone came from behind. $8 million. Fine, I'll take it. Daryl nodded after he gave a slight thought. Wow. Everyone went into a chaos at that moment. He was really buying it. $8 million for a broken rusted sword, was he out of his mind? At that moment, the few antique store owners were shaking their heads too. They had been observing the antique seller's sword for a while. It was not even an antique item, it's just some broken metal. Yvonne was the only one squeezing her brows light. Thinking. Lily had no knowledge at antique items at all. However, seeing everyone's reaction, she wanted to persuade Daryl. However, knowing Daryl's antique appraisal ability, she decided not to say anything. Humans would always make mistakes once in a while, no matter how capable Daryl was, it was very risky. It was obvious that the sword was a fake, it was covered with rust, it wouldn't have worth anything. Look, this brother here appreciates this sword. He was the most excited person now. After Daryl made the payment, the antique seller passed him the sword, and did not forget to give a thumbs up to Daryl. Under the eyes of everyone, Daryl wrapped the sword with a cloth. At that moment, Yvonne pointed at a green-based, flower porcelain plate, and asked lightly, "Boss, how much is this?" Daryl noticed that all the antique store owners paid full attention once Yvonne asked the question. Vaughn and the few antique store owners were there not for sightseeing. They heard that there was an antique seller at the red flag pedestrian walkway, and he had a porcelain plate from the song Din Sasti. Hence, they were there to check it out. There were many strategies in the trade of antique items, including observing one's reaction, as well as negotiation skills. Yvonne seized the opportunity when the seller had just sold an item, hence she asked for the price. "Beautiful lady, you have good taste. When I bought this porcelain plate from my friend, he told me it is something good. If you like it, I can sell it to you for $2 million. The antique seller replied with a big smile. Yvonne did not respond, she fell silent. The few antique store owners started discussing. "Boss, do you know who this lady in front of you is? How dare you say a price of $2 million? Exactly, I have been observing your porcelain plate for a while now. The color looks nice, the carving is unique, but it lacks the touch of ancient flavor. Not bad, your plate you have here. The workmanship and the color all looked like it's from the Song dynasty, however, it is a fake. The most it will be is a high-quality imitation item. It doesn't value at $2 million. Listening to all the remarks from the few antique store owners, the antique seller replied coldly, "That's the price for my item here, take it or leave it." The few antique store owners were shaking their head hearing what the antique seller said. Yvonne lost interest in that item instantly as well. The item was a fake one, it would still be fine if it was for $5,000. $2 million, only an idiot would buy it. "Boss, let me take a look." Daryl opened his mouth and said. Having to just earn $8 million from Daryl, the antique seller was really grateful. He handed the porcelain plate to Daryl without further thoughts. The rest of the antique store owners all looked at Daryl. Daryl held the porcelain plate on his hands and looked at it thoroughly. He then knocked on the plate slightly and said, "For a porcelain plate like this, if it is an imitation, the knocking sound of it will be muffled. This one has a crystal clear sound when being knocked. Besides that, it looked new not because it was produced recently, it was because the owner took good care of it, and would have some knowledge in antique too. That is why it looked as if it was newly made." After saying that, Daryl walked over and handed the porcelain plate to Yvonne, and said silently, "From my experience, this is not a fake, it's definitely worth $2 million. Listening to Daryl's words, Lily panicked and said, "Daryl, please don't say things you are unsure of. President Young will be able to appraise if it is genuine or fake. Don't show off." Episode 113. Listening to Lily's words, Yvonne smiled and said silently, "It's fine. I trust Daryl." Trust him? 3 years into their marriage, she had never heard about Daryl having the knowledge of antique appraisal. What she knew was that Daryl did all the washing and cooking at home, apart from that he was good for nothing. On the other hand, the Yvonne Young family had been in antique business for generations. Why was she listening to Daryl? Meanwhile, Daryl looked at the porcelain plate again and said, "Look at the flower carving, it is thick and round. A normal kiln owned by commoners would not be able to produce this type of item, it must have been made in a royal kiln." Hearing about a royal kiln, everyone was amazed with a sigh. If that was true, the porcelain plate would be a treasure. The few antique store owners sighed in regret. "Boss, I will take this porcelain plate for $2 million. Yvonne stepped forward in her stilettos, took out her cell phone, and wired the payment. Ding! $2 million wire transaction was successful. Wow! At the moment, everyone started to whisper, the Young family, being the master in antique, were really a rich family. $2 million spent within a blink of an eye. The antique seller was stunned, his eyes kept looking at the porcelain plate, rolling his eyes, his heart feeling complicated. The item was really an antique from the Song dynasty. If it was really as Daryl said, then $2 million for the porcelain plate was a great loss to the seller. Thinking of that, the antique seller took back the porcelain plate and said, "You have heard wrongly, it is not $2 million. How would I sell it for $2 million? Yvonne was not happy. "You have just said it is for $2 million, and I have already made the payment." The antique seller smiled, "Beautiful lady, I meant $2 million as the deposit. This porcelain plate's price is for $15 million. You made a deposit payment to me for $2 million, you will just need to pay me another $13 million. What? How could one trade like that?" Vaughn was very upset hearing that. "Boss, how can you behave like that?" Lily at the side could not help but said, "Exactly, how can you trade like that? You have no reputation at all." At that time, all surrounding people felt the antique seller was wrong. Yes, how can he go back on his own words? You just offered to sell that for $2 million, it changed to $15 million at a blink of an eye. Facing the comments of the crowd, the antique seller gave a cold grin, looking at Yvonne, "It is $15 million, take it or leave it." That was raising the price at the last minute. Yvonne bit her lips, she had never met such a person in her many years of antique business. What mattered most in the antique business was rules. The price should be final. Honestly, according to Daryl's appraisal, $15 million were not too expensive for the porcelain plate. However, the antique seller was too filthy, she rather gave up and gave in to that person. Yvonne then said, "Fine then, I don't want it anymore. Return the $2 million to me." "Yes, refund. Refund. Refund." Everyone started to shout. "Refund." The antique seller laughed and shook his head. "Too bad, I have a rule in my trade. All transactions are non-refundable. Either you pay for the whole sum of $15 million, otherwise, leave. Deposit is not refundable." Everyone was furious hearing that. This was obviously a cheat, ignoring the law. Yvonne was so furious, "How can you be like that? Why can't I don't buy it?" Yvonne had never faced such a type of person. She was shivering. Daryl could not stand it anymore, he walked forward and grabbed on the collar of the seller. "Are you going to refund or not? Oh, you want to fight? Try touching me." The antique seller was not worried, he replied coldly, "If you dare touch me, I will make sure you leave here lying down." It was obvious he was implying he had some background support. At that moment, sensing something not right, the crowd who were supporting Yvonne dropped into silence. One of the crowd stood forward. "Young man, do you know who is standing in front of you? She is Miss Young. You try to pull a trick on her, you better beware of the consequences." Young family. The antique seller grinned. "What about the Young family? My trade, my rules. You." Yvonne stomped her feet, that seller was evil. One of the people who went there with Yvonne could not stand it anymore and gave the antique seller a push. The antique seller fell a few steps back and was furious instantly. "You think you have a crowd and decided not to pay after buying an item. Stay still, and don't go. Speaking of that, the antique seller took out his cell phone and dialed a number. Episode 114. Once the call was connected, the antique seller put it on speaker mode. He was obviously trying to let others hear his conversation. "Hi, Brother Felix. It's me." The antique seller spoke into the phone, glancing at Daryl. "Brother Felix." After hearing that, everyone around shivered. How many people named Felix were there in Donghai City? Could it be? Everyone was wondering. At that moment, a deep voice came from the other end of the call. "What happened, cousin brother?" "Felix Blakely." "Shit, this guy's is the cousin brother of Felix Blakely." Why would Felix Blakely with a net worth of a few $billion have a cheater cousin brother? It was true. The guy on the other side of the line was the president of Black Tiger Real Estate, Felix Blakely. He was infamous in Donghai City. No one would want to mess with him. Everyone looked worried, especially a few of the antique store owners. They did not dare to speak. They backed out gradually, worried they might get themselves into trouble. Yvonne pursed her lips tightly. It seemed like she was about to lose $2 million that day. "President Young, let's just go," Lily whispered. She was worried too. Yvonne nodded, stepping on her stilettos to leave. She could not be waiting around for Felix to arrive. "No one is leaving this place today," the antique seller yelled. "Cousin brother," he continued, "I am selling some stuff here, and someone is trying to cause trouble." The antique seller pretended to be bullied. "What? Who has the guts to mess with you?" Felix shouted from the other end of the line after hearing the seller's words. Speaking of his cousin brother, Felix has had lots of headaches about him. He had always been up to no good, constantly finding trouble and picking fights. Felix would have to settle his problems for him every time. He had only recently heard that reselling antique items could make him some money, so he took some cash from Felix and opened a small stall. Felix was quite relieved with that. At least he was doing something legal. Felix had planned to let him work at his company once he got rid of his bad habit. Felix was distraught upon hearing that someone was giving trouble to his cousin brother. Yvonne wanted to leave at that moment, but the seller stopped her. She was anxious. "Where are you?" Felix shouted furiously. "Cousin brother, I am at Dash." The antique seller was about to share his location when Daryl stomped up to him suddenly and snatched the cell phone. "Felix Blakely," Daryl said coldly. "Who is this?" Felix interrogated. "Who do you think I am?" "Daryl. Brother Daryl." Felix was stunned, he could not find the words to say. "What?" Felix Blakely called him Brother Daryl. Everyone around was in shock. Lily looked at Daryl, completely speechless. That man was so familiar to her, yet so strange. What else did she not know about him? "Felix, are you ignoring what is right and wrong simply because of your position?" Daryl snickered. "You allowed your cousin brother to be a gangster, cheating people on the street." On the other side of the line, Felix was disturbed and on the verge of tears. "Daryl. Brother Daryl. What? What happened?" Daryl was too lazy to respond. "Ask your cousin brother yourself," he scoffed. He tossed the cell phone back to the seller after he spoke. He caught it and glared at Daryl. "Brother Felix," he trailed off. "Do not call me brother. Bastard, what have you done? Are you looking for death, daring to insult everyone? I have been pampering you too much." Felix yelled angrily. The antique seller shivered. His cousin brother had indeed been pampering him, getting him out of any trouble he got himself into. Felix had never been angry at him. However, Felix was furious about his incident. The antique seller's voice was trembling as he recounted the entire ordeal to Felix. "Bastard, what have I taught you all this while?" Felix was seething with rage. "Don't you know? Even I have to respect Brother Daryl." "You bastard, do you want me to break your legs? Apologize to Brother Daryl this instant and refund him the money." Lily felt her legs shake, staring at Daryl without blinking. Episode 115. The antique seller was in shock and kept nodding his head. He did not dare to go against Felix's words. "Pass the phone to Brother Darrell," he demanded. When the cell phone was handed to Darrell, Felix's voice trembled on the other end of the line. "Brother Darrell, it's my fault. I didn't control my people properly. I will go over there now to apologize to Miss Young now." "No need." Yvonne spoke up, still stunned. How could she let Felix apologize to her? Darrell shook his head. "It's all right, you don't have to come here. Just make sure to control your people in the future." He was lucky it was just me today, or he would have been in big trouble. "Yes, sure, Brother Darrell. You are right," Felix replied. Darrell did not want to say more and went on to disconnect the call. The antique seller was about to cry. He kept bowing to Darrell. "I am sorry. Extremely sorry, Brother Darrell. If I knew that you were friends with Brother Felix, I would not have dared to do this." He then apologized to Yvonne and handed her the porcelain plate as he spoke. "Let's go, then," Darrell said, turning around to leave. A small stall in the corner caught his eye, displaying a pot of flowers. The flowers were exceptional. The petals were dainty, but they blossomed nicely. What was more remarkable was its leaves. Half were light green, and the other half was dark green. At a glance, it looked like it was painted on. "What type of flower is this?" Darrell was intrigued as he asked the seller. The seller handed Darrell the pot of flowers. "Brother Darrell, I picked these up from up the hills by accident. I thought they were a rare breed, so I brought them back home. After doing some research, I discovered it was called a bicolor flower. It is indeed a rare plant." Bicolor flower. The name sounded familiar. Where had he seen it before? Darrell gave it a deep thought. Yes, it was mentioned in the Infinite Elixir manual. The bicolor flower was an ingredient for the production of many types of medications. In fact, bicolor flower was the key ingredient for many medicinal concoctions. "How much will you sell this for?" Darrell asked. "Brother Darrell, you can decide. I do not date to ask for anything." The seller smiled. "Let me give this bicolor flower to you as a gift." Darrell accepted the offer. He nodded while holding the pot of bicolor flower and walked out of the mall with Lily. "Darrell, what is your relationship with Felix?" Lily could not help but ask. Darrell smiled and replied casually, "Just a friend." Seeing that he was not willing to divulge more, Lily did not ask further. That man was tough for her to understand. During the past 3 years of marriage, everyone felt he was a useless person. She thought the same too. Darrell had no friends. He used to go grocery shopping alone. Why did it seem that he had so many friends now? All of them were great people too. "It's almost dinner time. Why don't the 3 of you have dinner at my place?" Yvonne walked over in her stilettos. "Darrell has helped me out a lot recently, so please come have dinner at my place." Before Darrell could reply, Lily smiled and said, "That'll be great. Darrell, let's go." The young family was powerful and influential in Donghai City. Lily wanted to build a relationship with Yvonne, so it would be a great time to get to know her more. Lily had already agreed, so Darrell could not reject it. In his car, Darrell looked around. All 3 beautiful ladies, Lily, Yvonne, and Jade, were beautiful in their own way. On the road, many people could not help but look into their car. The month of August in Donghai City was hot in the day but cold at night. The temperature change was drastic. Darrell rolled up the window and sneezed. Shit, was he getting a cold? He was already a cultivator, and he was catching a cold. Darrell sighed deeply. The young family's home was a traditional mansion located in the south part of Donghai City. It was said that the building was from the Mingqing dynasty. The decor inside was traditional and elegant, matching the family's antique business. Once inside, Darrell was fascinated by the setting of the mansion. The hall was located in the north, facing south. The view was not obstructed by any other building. The setting was reasonable, and the feng shui was great. Even though it was not a treasured land, it was a great piece of land. Although the young family was in the antique business, there was no antique item in the house. Antique items may be possessed, hence it should not be put on display. For example, a past emperor's antique items would not be displayed in a typical family's home. For antique items used by women in the past, they held onto intense feminine energy. Hence, they would not be suitable for display as well. At home, Yvonne acted as the hostess. She went into the kitchen and started cooking. Lily and Jade were helping her too. Soon, the three beautiful ladies were busy while chatting and laughing away. Women would always have plenty to talk about. The three of them were giggling and chuckling as they cooked. Undeniably, all three of them were beautiful in their own way, along with sexy bodies, of course. Based on their looks and qualities, Yvonne was cold and elegant. Lily was a knowledgeable beauty. Jade was sexy and attractive. Episode 116. The three beautiful ladies gathering together was such a pleasing sight. Daryl admired them for a while sitting on the sofa. After a while, he got bored and switched on the TV. Achoo. 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 Daryl sneezed a few more times, and his nose started to run. Damn it, I must have caught a cold. He muttered to himself as he grabbed 2 pieces of tissue paper and wiped his nose. He tossed them aside on the coffee table and picked up the TV remote to browse through the channels. He searched for channels on Donghai TV, but an explicit adult channel showed up instead after pressing some buttons. Damn it. What kind of TV was this? Why did it have such channels? Daryl, can I get you some drinks? Yvonne walked in from the kitchen, just as Daryl got into the mood from watching the channel he accidentally came across. Quickly, Daryl snapped out of the show and tried to change the channel in a hurry. However, no matter what button he pressed, the channel did not change. Damn it. Daryl, is everything all right? Yvonne asked in confusion. She flinched as she accidentally glanced over at the TV screen. A red flush appeared on her face instantly. What show was this? Daryl, he. Ah. Yvonne screamed. No. Don't scream. I didn't watch. Damn it. He was helplessly caught in the act. How was he going to get out of this? Both Lily and Jade walked in after they heard Yvonne's shouting. Once they entered, they saw the show playing on TV. Not only that, there were 2 wads of tissue paper, with green snot still in them. Suddenly, Lily and Jade looked at each other when the realization hit them. No, ladies. This isn't what you think it is. I caught a cold. Daryl was furiously helpless. Daryl, what is this? Lily scowled as she stomped her foot, glaring at him. Yvonne and Jade were embarrassed as they turned around and left the room. Lily and Daryl were left alone. Lily's delicate face flushed red like a ripened cherry. She glared at him, scowling through gritted teeth. Daryl, what? What were you doing? You. This is not your house. How could you do this? Lily could not muster her words. She was too embarrassed. Her face was full of shame while still trying to restrain her anger. She was charming. Daryl stared blankly at her, admiring his wife. You have misunderstood the situation. I haven't done anything wrong. Who would have thought that the TV would show such a thing? Also, I think I may have caught a cold. The tissue. He trailed off. Lily was not convinced. Her face was burning red as she scolded, "Here you are, making things up. I shouldn't have come here with you. How am I supposed to look President Young in the eye?" This was far too embarrassing. The more Lily thought about it, the more ashamed she felt. Daryl helplessly yelled in defense, "Oh, darling. Forget it if you don't believe me, but I've caught a cold." Daryl rushed into the toilet hastily after saying that, avoiding the impending disaster. Huh? Are you going to the toilet too? As she watched Daryl rush into the toilet, a disturbing image flashed in her mind, turning her face an even deeper shade of red. She stomped her feet as she went back into the kitchen. Daryl pretended not to hear it. He tossed the tissue into the bin and washed her face with water. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Yvonne had just recovered from the embarrassment as she walked over to open the door. Since they had company over every day, she thought it was just another guest. However, when she opened the door, a bunch of well-built men dressed in black rushed into the house. the man leading them was Skylar Burr. "Tie up these 3 women." Skylar growled in anger. In an instant, the men surrounded the 3 of them, tying them up with rope. "Daryl, show yourself." Skylar roared as he kicked the toilet door open. Episode 117. Oh, no. Skylar Burr was here. Daryl was relieving himself when he heard a loud smack from the toilet door being kicked open. "Skylar Burr, are you mad? I'm the East King." Daryl tried to pretend, not having any idea what an East King even was. "Yeah, go on." Skylar sniggered. "Keep pretending to be the East King. Today, I'll make you cry." By then, the 3 women were tied up by the men as they were pushed into the living room. They were no ordinary men, but the disciples of the Heaven Cult. Daryl was furious, but he knew there was no way he could fight them alone. He took a deep breath to cool off. A faint smile appeared on Skylar's lips. "Follow me," he hissed. With that he walked into the bedroom. Daryl had no choice but to follow him in. Skylar wanted to speak with Daryl in private since he was the one who stole the ascension of the 9 dragons from the Grandmaster Heaven Cult. He kept the secret well, and his followers had no clue. After all, it was a death sentence for stealing the Grandmaster's secret manual. Skylar had always stayed alert. He closed the door and coldly looked at Daryl. "Where's the secret manual?" Skylar questioned, holding up his fist. "What secret manual?" Daryl played dumb. Skylar's glare darkened. "Daryl Darby, don't you dare challenge my patience. I'll let you off the hook for pretending to be the East King, but I need the ascension of the 9 dragons back. Or else, I'll make you regret it." After a slight pause, he continued, "You seem to care about the 3 women outside, don't you? I don't mind entertaining them before I kill you. I'll tell you what, the men who came with me, they haven't touched any women in quite a while." "Damn." Daryl swore when he heard that. "Fine, I'll return it to you," he sighed. "The manual isn't with me at the moment. It's somewhere else." "Do El look dumb enough to believe that?" Skylar warned, looking deadly. Daryl answered helplessly, "It's really not with me now." "All right, you have half an hour to hand me the manual. Or else, stay tuned for a live stream of my men having fun with the 3 women outside." Skylar threatened, his eyes flickering. Daryl shook his head helplessly. There was no other way out but to return the manual to him. Luckily, he had already learned and mastered all the teachings and techniques taught in the manual. When Skylar was about to open the door, a thumping sound was heard. Bam! Suddenly, the strong-built Skylar collapsed to the ground, his body convulsing uncontrollably. His face was distorted as he moaned in pain. "Ah!" Skylar rolled around on the floor, suffering from the pain. "Damn, what just happened? He was fine just a moment ago." Skylar kept rolling on the floor, his whole body covered in sweat. He never would have expected the toxic from the Heaven Cult elixir would activate this very moment. All disciples of Heaven Cult must take this elixir refined by their Grandmaster. Once ingested, an antidote must be taken manually, or else the disciple would die of broken veins. However, only the one and only Grandmaster possessed the antidote to the elixir. Therefore, all the disciples treated their Grandmaster with their utmost respect and loyalty because their lives depended on the Grandmaster. If they had offended the Grandmaster, they would not be given the antidote. They would end up dead. Skylar was meant to take his antidote today. He planned to visit the Grandmaster at the altar today to receive his antidote, then secretly return the stolen manual to its original place. This way, nobody would have known the manual was ever stolen. Unfortunately, now that it was stolen by Daryl, his plan was ruined. Without an antidote, he had no choice but to wait for his impending death. As Skylar suffered, he stared at Daryl with murderous intent, a look filled with hatred. At the same time, Daryl was observing him. "Skylar, looking at you, I'm guessing you must have taken the Heaven Cult elixir, right?" Daryl speculated, with a knowing smile. "What? How did he know about the elixir?" Skylar trembled while looking at Daryl with wonder. He endured the pain and nodded. "So it is the Heaven Cult elixir." Daryl mumbled to himself. When he read the Infinite Elixir manual, he remembered learning about the Heaven Cult elixir. When the toxin broke out, it was precisely like what Skylar was going through. However, the manual also recorded the recipe of its antidote, which was relatively simple. In fact, the bicolor flower he got earlier was the main ingredient. Daryl smiled proudly. "I can give you the antidote, but you'll have to promise me to let go of the 3 women outside." What? This dude had the antidote? Impossible. The Heaven Cult elixir, and its antidote. These were the secrets of the Grandmaster Heaven Cult. Even the Grand Mistress did not know it. Where did he learn them from? "Okay, I promise. Save me, save me," he wailed. Skylar was struggling in immense pain. When the toxin broke out, he felt as if a million ants were crawling in his veins, extremely uncomfortable. He would agree with whatever Daryl said to save himself. Although the 3 women outside were very tempting, they were nothing compared to his dear life. "I'll ask you again. If I give you the antidote, will you let them go? You will keep your words, yes?" Daryl asked slowly and calmly. "I'll promise, please save me." Skylar was covered in sweat as he articulated each word through his gritted teeth. "All right, I'll trust you this time." With that said, he walked to the stove and turned on the gas. He took out the bicolor flower and started refining the antidote. Episode 118. "You're lucky that you met me today, or else you'd be dead in no time." Daryl scoffed as he put the bicolor flower into the clay pot. He began to prepare the other ingredients. Other than the bicolor flower, the antidote required was rice vinegar and peony petals. Daryl stupefied Skylar as he watched him work. Was he refining the antidote right there? Did he know the recipe, or was he just pretending? The Heaven Cult elixir's antidote. How could someone else other than the Grandmaster know about it? Questions flooded Skylar's mind. Finally, an elixir appeared in Daryl's hand. He was done. "Eat it," Daryl demanded as he put the pill in Skylar's mouth. Alt Hog Daryl seemed calm. He was nervous deep down. If the pill did not work and Skylar died, the disciples outside would assume he killed Skylar. It would turn out mortifying. However, Daryl was overthinking. In less than 5 minutes, Skylar's pale face returned to normal, and his body stopped twitching. Daryl sighed in relief. It seemed that the infinite elixir was true. He had successfully refined 2 elixirs, first the godly pill, and now this antidote. Thank you, thank you." Skylar finally stood up, staggering. What happened next caught Daryl entirely off guard. Skylar dropped to his knees with tears rolling down his cheeks. "Daryl. Oh, no. Brother Daryl, please save my brothers. They all ingested the elixir a day later than I did. Without the antidote, they will die tomorrow. Please, I beg you." He sobbed. With that, he bowed his head onto the ground 3 times. Daryl lowered his head to look at him and sighed. To be honest, the Heaven Cult did not make a good impression on him. As they said, this cult was full of evil and violent disciples. Yet, as he looked at Skylar who begged on behalf of his brothers, he knew he was a man of his words. Even as high-ranking master, he went on his knees to plead for the lives of his brothers. Skylar's act moved Daryl as he nodded. "Skylar, I'm very impressed by how you treat your brothers. However, to make this antidote, I'll need an essential ingredient. It is the bicolor flower that I used." Excitement filled Skylar's face. "Brother Daryl, this ingredient is not difficult to find. I know a place with plenty of bicolor flowers. However, the place is dangerous, with many beasts lurking around. Don't worry, I'll ask my brothers to get them for you. I could bring you there with us if you'd prefer." Daryl was enthralled. He knew that the bicolor flower was the critical ingredient in many recipes. If he could get a hold of a large number of flowers, he could refine other elixirs. To him, this was something meaningful. "I'll ask my brothers to pick the flowers right now." Skylar beamed as turned around, preparing to leave. After a few steps, he turned back again and bowed down to Daryl. "Brother Daryl, I came here today to look for trouble, yet you saved my life. I salute your kindness. From today onwards, I will follow you around to do anything you instruct me to." With that, urgent sincerity glimmered in his eyes. Brother Darrell. Skylar exclaimed. Please be our hall master. I will hand over my position to you. Ah. To join the Heaven cult. Darrell was caught off guard, wanting to reject the offer instinctively. This cult was full of violence. He did not want to get involved with it, but he needed an excuse to reject the offer. You're kidding me. Darrell smiled bitterly. How could you simply hand over your position? Didn't the Grandmaster appoint you? Brother Darrell, you've mistaken. Skylar shook his head. In the Heaven cult, only the Yin and Yang messengers and the 4 guardian kings were elected by the Grandmaster. As for the Hall Master, it is usually appointed by the brothers. We merely have to inform the guarding king above us. The White Tiger governs the hall in the Donghai city. Once Brother Darrell agrees, I'll report to the White Tiger right away. What do you say? This. A glint of disappointment flashed on Skylar's face. To Brother Darrell, we might come across as a cult. I won't be surprised if you don't want to be a part of us. Darrell waved his hand, hastily. No, you're mistaken, I did not look down on you, he interjected. Following that, Darrell gritted his teeth and announced, Fine, I promise you. He had no way to reject him. They were a bunch of sincere and honest men. He just could not. That's great news. Skylar was pleased. He knelt on his knees. Greetings to our hall master from your disciple, Skylar Burr. Please get up. Darrell helped him up. Damn it, what just happened? Have Elle become a hall master? Skylar was bursting with excitement beside him. Brother Darrell, I'll inform the brothers to pick the bicolor flowers right away, he exclaimed and left with the other men hurriedly. In the living room, the 3 women who were tied up sighed in relief after seeing the men leave. They had no idea what had happened since Darrell and Skylar talked in the bedroom. Darrell waltzed into the living room with a joyful smile, ready to untie the. His determination was strong, having 3 beautiful ladies in front of him, not tempting whatsoever. They were even tied up. As he walked closer to them, their light fragrance grew stronger. Yvonne was in a long dress, gentle and elegant, Lily was in tight shorts, hot and sexy, and Jade was in a mini skirt, her fair legs charming. Even the Heaven cult disciples had a hard time containing themselves while looking at them. Episode 119. Darrell, please untie us. Also, who were those people? What were they doing here? Lily asked quietly. Nothing much. Darrell shook his head. I don't even know them. LT was a misunderstanding, they came for the wrong person. He would not tell anyone about him becoming the hall master, of course. After all, the Heaven cult did not have a good reputation. While he was untying them, they heard the door open, followed by an outrage. Darrell. What do you think you're doing? Looking in the direction of the door, it was Yvonne's father, Kingston Young. He stood by the door, his face darkened by the horror and rage in his eyes. The corners of his eyes twitched slightly. Oh, my lord. Oh my. Kingston held on to his chest, panting heavily. He slammed his bag on the floor. I know you youngsters are open-minded nowadays, but this is just wrong. Oh my. Kingston screamed as he held onto his chest, still breathing heavily. Since they were young, he had brought up his children to be conservative. Right now, he was mortified by the sight of his usually obedient daughter taking part in such an activity. It's all the father's fault. It's all my fault. Kingston retreated a few steps, his eyes rolling back into his head as he almost fainted. Uncle Young. Darrell stopped untying the ladies immediately and rushed over to support Kingston from falling. What is he on about? This man is too stubborn. Darrell thought. He was amused but helpless. At this moment, Yvonne, Lily, and Jade were flushed with their cheeks burning, utterly embarrassed. However, that was not the worst of it. Kingston accidentally glanced at the unused tissues on the coffee table. He burst out uncontrollably. Tissue. With white liquid in it. Darrell, you. Kingston's face turned pale, his lips trembling. It was his own precious daughter. How could he defile her purity? His daughter Yvonne was a well-educated, attractive, and elegant woman with countless suitors dreaming to even get to know her. What was so good about Darrell? As others had said, he was just a useless son-in-law. Ah. Uncle Young, don't dwell on it too much. I've got to go. Darryl rambled in a rush to leave the house as soon as possible. Damn it. If I don't run away now, when will Elle ever? If I don't leave by now, who knows when this man will start making up stories, he thought as he picked up the scissors hurriedly and untied the women. However, he was in such a rush that he accidentally touched Yvonne. Sadly, he did not have time to feel the touch. Darryl brought Lily and Jade along with him as if escaping a disaster. After they left, Kingston grabbed onto his chest as he reclined onto the sofa languidly. Dad, don't be angry. You've misunderstood the situation completely. Yvonne went forward to explain. Fine, why don't you tell me what happened? Well, a group of men suddenly barged in. Yvonne described the situation from start to finish in a low voice. However, she did not know what Darryl and Skylar were doing in the bedroom. A group of men barged into our house and tied the three of you up. They didn't do anything and left. After listening to Yvonne's depiction, Kingston sounded more disappointed. Yvonne, do you really think I'm an idiot? How could you make up such lies? Dad. Yvonne, listen to me. I know you youngsters are more open-minded these days, more creative with things and stuff. But please keep in mind that you're the heiress of the Young family. Also, Darryl has a wife. With that said, he closed his eyes and shook his head. Lily, too. How could she allow her husband to do such a thing? Yvonne trailed off, ashamed, and unjustly accused. There was no way to explain the situation to Kingston. I really don't understand. The more he thought about it, the more furious he became. What's so good about Darryl? Other than being able to appraise antiques, what else can he do? Yvonne gave up on defending herself. She stood by his side and listened quietly. However, if you really like him, I can only respect your decision as your father under one condition. He must divorce Lily, and the other woman, Jade, was it? He has to cut it off with her too. He must be loyal to you. Episode 120. Dad, what are you talking about? When did I ever want to? Yvonne stomped her feet, her face flushed. Although she outwardly said so, she could not help Darryl's images floating inside her mind. It was challenging to know what Darryl was thinking. He always surprised everyone. According to people, he was pure trash, a cowardly, useless person. Yet, the Darryl that she knew was as mysterious as the ocean. With him, she felt safe. Strange. Why would she have such weird thoughts? She blushed. After leaving the house, Lily parked the car at the supermarket entrance. Darryl, why don't you send Jade home? Lily asked. I'll get some groceries to make you dinner tonight. Make me dinner? Darryl thought, shockingly. For the past 3 years, it had always been him making dinner for them. He had never imagined Lily to be the one cooking for him. Sure. Darryl nodded, driving away after seeing Lily enter the supermarket. The two of them remained in the car. Seeing that Jade had become awkward, Darryl laughed it off. Don't be nervous. I don't bite. No, I'm not nervous, she whispered, placing her hands between her thighs awkwardly. He did not bite, but she was still afraid of him. The other night at the moonlit river, she saw with her own eyes Samson Facey, Harry's godfather, bowing down to Darryl. Today, he even scolded Felix Blakely through the phone. Jade regretted having disdained Darryl in the past by making him do her laundry. Who would have known that he had such patience? I know you're Lily's best friend. Darryl spoke. Since the start of our marriage, I know you treat her well with your whole heart. You always thought of her whenever there was something good. Look, I'd like to share some good news with you. Darryl glanced at her. I'm about to start up a real estate company, he continued. LD like to hire you as the chairman. Ah, really? A happy and excited grin formed on Jade's face. Darryl smiled and nodded in return. He had done his research. Currently, the two best industries to invest in were the entertainment industry and the real estate industry. In the next 10 years, these industries foresee stable growth. Since consumers nowadays would spend all their money on their idols, the entertainment industry had its potential. But, he already owned Platinum Corporation, along with its successful shows featuring famous superstars. Therefore, it was time to invest in the real estate industry. Daryl knew that Felix Blakely was doing quite well with his real estate business. Since Felix wanted to develop his business outside the province, Daryl did not want to create any further conflict. He knew that some land beside Dong Hai City was to be used for underground stations. Once Daryl established the real estate company, he would buy the land before construction. He would make some good money while they built the underground stations. To establish a real estate company, Daryl needed a trusted chairman. Although Jade was a woman, she had experience working in real estate, and she currently worked for an interior design company. Therefore, she was more than qualified to be the chairman. Your salary will be 5 times higher than the usual market rate. Daryl waved his hand as he spoke. Jade was shocked. 5 times higher. Thank you. Thank you, Daddy Daryl. Jade excitedly chirped with joy. All she wanted to do was give a kiss to this man she claimed as her daddy after offering her such a fantastic job. No problem. I do have one condition. Daryl interrupted, I'm paying extra because you're always with Lily. From now onwards, if Lily faces any problems, you'll update me immediately. Your daughter promises to complete her mission. Jade gushed cheekily.
For more episode, don't forget to subscribe.